Hello everyone, this is Mike for KickstartPoker.com, and in today's video I want to talk about check-raise bluffing. This is something that you see quite frequently nowadays, and I guess it's a little bit of a trend, and it's definitely a very effective weapon that you can use when you're out of position against an aggressive player and a frequent c-better. But it's also something that you have to be able to respond effectively against if you feel that your opponents are using it. That's what happens in this hand, where I raise king-queen offsuit from the cutoff position to 3 times the big blind. It gets folded around to the big blind, who calls. And immediately looking at his statistics, we can see from his fold big blind to steal percentage, which is 73%. It's only over 11 hands, so it's not really a representative sample, but it's pretty consistent with what we see for the rest of his statistics. He's a pretty tight, aggressive player, so he's going to be very tight out of position as well. So a calling range of 73% makes sense here for this player, and I think that his pre-flop calling range consists mostly of hands like small to medium pairs, small suited aces, and maybe some good suited connectors like 10-jack suited or something, but overall a pretty small calling range. So we go to the flop, which is ace-ace-9, and he checks to us, and I think this is a pretty good board to just continuation bet. The pot is 220 chips, which is a significant part of our stack. And we can represent the ace, of course. There's only one flush draw possibility on the board, and we shouldn't be really worried about that. And there aren't any straight draws out there, so it's a pretty dry board. 2 aces, and I think when we continuation bet, we can just take it down pretty frequently. So we make a continuation bet of 120 chips, and interestingly, he min check raises us to 240 chips. Now, given his pre-flop calling range, there aren't many ace-x hands he can have. He will most likely 3-bet his better aces, I think ace-9 suited or better, and he will fold the raggy offsuit aces, so only some small to medium suited ace-x hands maybe are in his range. But secondly, given there are 2 aces on board, this limits the number of ace-x combinations he can have, so it's mathematically also a little bit less likely that he has an ace here. Thirdly, would he really check raise here with trip aces? Wouldn't it make much more sense to check call so it can see if I keep bluffing at the pot on the turn and river? So all things combined, I think it's very unlikely that he has trip aces here. So our question is, do we fold, call, or raise? I think folding is an option, but I feel it would be a mistake here because, as I said, I think it's unlikely that he has an ace. So we should have really good opportunities to just take down the pot here if he doesn't have an ace. We could call, but that's not really a great option. It will create a pot of 700 chips, and we would have around 960 chips left. And what are we going to do if he bets again at the turn? Unless it's a king or a queen, we would probably have to give it up. Plus, we give him a free chance to hit something on a turn as well if he happens to have like a suited connector or maybe a flush draw if we just call. So I think all in all, a re-raise is the best option here. We may be able to get him to fold a pair of 9s, but we can also get him to fold his small pairs, which still beat us. So pairs like deuces to 8s. They beat our hand. We only have king high here. And I think there's a very good chance that we can just get him to fold those types of hands. There are a lot of those hands in his calling range. It's pretty likely that he's trying to check raise bluff us off our hand if he thinks that we do not have an ace. This is really a good board for him to check raise on, because if we don't have an ace, he can expect to have some fold equity against us. In some cases, we have him beat here when he has, for example, a suited connector hand like a Jack-10 suited or something. But still, that's not no reason to just call, because that will put us in a tricky spot if he keeps firing the turn and river. Plus, we'll give him a free card to hit as well. So a re-raise is in order, and we can still get away from the hand if he 4-bet shoves us, in which case we are definitely beat. I don't think this opponent is capable of 4-bet shoving us as a total bluff here. So if our opponent would be able to 4-bet shove on a total bluff here, we are better off to shove over his check raise ourselves to maximize full equity and to prevent him from re-bluffing us. But in this case, I make a smaller re-raise, so I still give myself the option to fold if he comes over the top and shoves all in. Because against this particular type of opponent, we're probably beat if he just shoves over us again. I don't see him doing that as a bluff. So small re-raise here, and it gets the job done. He just folds. Now, from his perspective, I think making the min check raise as a bluff, it will work against bad players, against beginning players, because they will be intimidated by this ace-high board. But against better players who realize that there are very few ace-x hands in his pre-flop calling range, this min check raise doesn't look really convincing, and it's most likely that he's doing that with either some small pocket pairs, small to medium pocket pairs, or just complete air. That he's just making a cheap bluff and trying to take the pot down. So if you're in a situation like this where your opponent min check raises on the flop when you make a continuation bet, always evaluate his pre-flop calling range and his check raising range. And especially on boards like these that are pretty dry and are ace high, you see that a lot of opponents are trying to bluff you off your hand with a check raise, and you have to be prepared to come back over the top against aggressive players who will try to check raise bluff you. All right, that's it. I hope you got something out of it, and I'll see you next time.